On Boxing Day, 1900, December 26th, a relief lighthouse keeper named Joseph Mòr climbed 160 steps alone to the top of the Eilean Mòr lighthouse on the Flannan Isles off the northwest coast of Scotland. No one had met the boat. No flag had been raised. No flare had been answered. Mòr opened the door to the lighthouse kitchen and found a table set for a meal that had never been eaten, a clock on the wall that had stopped, a fire that hadn't been lit in days, a canary alive in its cage, and no sign of the three men who had been stationed there. James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald McArthur. They had disappeared on or around December 15th. The last entries in the logbook were dated the 13th, but the morning readings for December 15th, barometric pressure, wind direction, temperature, taken at 9 a.m. as required, were written on a slate, ready to be transferred to the log. Someone had done their work that morning, and then, sometime that afternoon, all three men had vanished. No bodies were ever found. The official cause of death, probably drowning. It has been 125 years. Nobody knows what happened between 9 a.m. and nightfall on December 15th, 1900. We found something in the Hesperus captain's private correspondence that was never included in the official report. The Flannan Isles lighthouse had been operational for less than 2 years when the keepers vanished. It stood on Eilean Mòr, the largest of the Flannan Isles, a cluster of small, rocky, largely uninhabited islands approximately 20 miles west of the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides. The lighthouse had been built by the Northern Lighthouse Board and completed in 1899, designed to warn ships away from one of the most treacherous stretches of water on the North Atlantic route. The waters around the Flannan Isles were known for their ferocity, violent storms, unpredictable currents, seas that could change from manageable to lethal in less than an hour. The lighthouse required 3 men on permanent rotation, a principal keeper, an assistant keeper, and an occasional keeper who covered absences. The men worked 6-week shifts. The rotation was managed by a supply vessel, the Hesperus, which brought provisions and relief keepers on a regular schedule. In December 1900, the 3 men stationed on Eilean Mòr were James Ducat, the principal keeper, 40 years old, experienced, a man who had worked for the Northern Lighthouse Board for over a decade. His supervisors described him as dependable, methodical, and calm under pressure. Thomas Marshall, the second assistant, 28 years old, less experienced than Ducat, but capable and reliable. He was unmarried. Donald McArthur, the occasional keeper, standing in for the first assistant, William Ross, who was on sick leave. McArthur was older than the other 2 and had worked the Flannan Isles posting before. These were not inexperienced men. They were not given to panic or poor judgment. They had worked through North Atlantic storms before. Whatever happened on December 15th, it was not because they didn't know what they were doing. The Hesperus arrived at the Flannan Isles on December 26th, 11 days after the 3 men had disappeared. The delay was not unusual. The vessel's schedule had been disrupted by weather, and an 11-day gap between visits to a remote posting was within normal parameters. No one on the mainland had particular reason to be alarmed until the ship approached the island and got no response. Captain Jim Harvey recorded what happened in his official log. The ship raised its flag as it approached, standard protocol to signal arrival to the keepers. No flag was raised in return. The horn was sounded, no response. A flare was sent up, nothing. Harvey sent Joseph Mòr ashore alone. As was customary, the first approach was made by a single man before the rest of the crew disembarked. Mòr's account of what he found was recorded in the official inquiry. The entrance gate to the compound was closed. The main door to the lighthouse was closed. Mòr opened it and found the kitchen exactly as it would appear if the 3 men had stepped out for a moment and expected to return. The table was set for a meal. The meal had not been eaten. The fire in the range had gone out, and given the cold and the ash, had been out for days. The clock on the kitchen wall had stopped. The beds were unmade. not slept in recently, but not made, as if the men had risen quickly and not taken time for the ordinary rituals of the morning. A canary sat in its cage. It was alive. Mòr searched the lighthouse. He found nothing, no signs of struggle, no blood, no evidence of an accident inside the building. He found the lamp in order, ready to be lit. He found the log, with entries through December 13th. He found, on a slate near the log, the morning readings for December 15th, pressure, temperature, wind direction, recorded in the careful hand of a man doing his job. The readings had not been transferred to the log, which meant whoever had taken those readings on the morning of December 15th had expected to transfer them later, and had never done so. The physical evidence at the lighthouse was limited but specific. 3 sets of oilskins, the heavy waterproof coats worn by sailors and lighthouse keepers in rough weather, were kept in the lighthouse. When Mòr and the subsequent investigators checked, only 1 set remained on its hook. 2 sets were missing. This meant 2 of the 3 men had put on their oilskins before they left. 1 had not. In December, on the Flannan Isles, in weather severe enough to have damaged the West Landing, the access point on the island's western side, where investigators later found evidence of a significant storm impact, going outside without oilskins was not a minor oversight. It was the kind of thing a trained lighthouse keeper would only do if there was no time to stop, or if they had not expected to go outside at all. The investigators considered 2 scenarios. In the first, 2 men went to the West Landing to check or secure equipment. The third man, the one without oilskins, saw something from the lighthouse and ran to help without stopping to dress. A wave took all 3. In the second, something happened quickly enough and urgently enough that one man did not have time to reach for his coat. Both scenarios are consistent with the physical evidence. Neither is fully satisfying. The canary matters more than most accounts acknowledge. A canary kept in a cage requires regular feeding and water. In December 1900, without a keeper attending to it, a canary on a remote Scottish island would have survived, at the outside, approximately 4 to 5 days before dying of dehydration or starvation. When Mòr found the canary, it was alive and apparently healthy. This places a constraint on the timeline. The canary's condition indicates that someone had been tending to it within the previous few days, almost certainly within the 72 to 96 hours before Mòr arrived on December 26th, which means the 3 men, or at least one of them, may have been alive and functioning until approximately December 22nd or 23rd. This is inconsistent with the official theory, which places the disappearance on December 15th. The canary's survival has rarely been incorporated into the analysis of what happened. The official inquiry focused on the physical damage at the West Landing and the missing oilskins. The canary appears in witness accounts of the scene but is not addressed in the final report. We asked a historian who specializes in Northern Lighthouse Board records why the canary's survival wasn't more thoroughly examined. She said, "The inquiry was conducted quickly and under pressure. Captain Harvey needed an explanation for the Lighthouse Board and the families of the dead men. A wave is a clean explanation. The canary makes it messy. We asked, does she think the canary means the official timeline is wrong? She said, I think the canary means we don't actually know when those men disappeared, and that's a different case than the one in the official record. The West Landing was the key piece of evidence in the official explanation. Investigators who examined the island found significant storm damage at the West Landing, the access point on the island's western side used for loading and unloading supplies. Large rocks had been displaced. Iron railings had been bent. A set of mooring ropes, which had been stored in a box bolted to the rock, had been removed, not untied but physically torn away. The official superintendent, Robert Muirhead, concluded that 2 of the men had gone to the West Landing to check on this damage and secure equipment. The third had seen something, perhaps a wave, perhaps the other men in distress, and had run down without stopping for his oilskins. A rogue wave or a series of waves had swept all three into the sea. This explanation is, as explanations go, entirely plausible. The damage at the West Landing was real. The North Atlantic in December is capable of waves of extraordinary size and force. Men have been swept from exposed coastal positions under exactly these conditions. But there are problems. The morning readings for December 15th, recorded at 9 a.m., show barometric pressure and wind direction consistent with improving conditions, not the extreme weather that would be required to produce the kind of wave damage found at the West Landing. That damage, some meteorologists have argued, was more consistent with the storm that had passed through the area in the days before December 15th, not with conditions on December 15th itself. If the damage was from an earlier storm and conditions on December 15th were relatively calm, then why did all three men go to the West Landing together? Protocol required that one keeper always remain in the lighthouse. Sending all three down to the exposed landing simultaneously in relatively calm conditions was not standard procedure. And if the canary was still alive when Mòr arrived on December 26th, then the timeline doesn't work at all. Captain Jim Harvey filed an official log report with the Northern Lighthouse Board. That report has been published and is part of the historical record. It describes the scene in careful, measured terms. It records what Mòr found, what the subsequent investigation discovered, and Harvey's conclusion, which aligned with Muirhead's, that the men had been lost to the sea. What has not been published is Harvey's private correspondence from the same period. These letters, written to his wife and to a colleague in the Lighthouse Board, were held by a private family archive for over a century. In 2019, some of this correspondence was deposited with a regional archive in Scotland and became accessible to researchers. The letters have not been widely covered. Most of the reporting on the 2019 Flannan Isles film and anniversary coverage focused on the existing public record. We obtained access to the letters. In a letter dated January 3, 1901, 8 days after the Hesperus's visit to the island, Harvey wrote to his colleague with a specific question that does not appear in the official record. He asked whether the board had ever investigated the condition of the West Landing before the December storm, whether there was any record of the landing having been previously compromised, of the mooring box having been tampered with, or the railing having been weakened before the storm that was said to have caused the damage. He did not say why he was asking. He did not say what had prompted the question. His colleague's reply, if there was one, is not in the archive, but the question is there. And the question suggests that Harvey, privately, was not fully satisfied with the explanation he had signed off on officially. He was asking whether the damage at the West Landing, the damage that supposedly explained everything, had been caused by something other than a single storm. We are not saying the damage was caused deliberately. We are saying that the man who wrote the official report was, privately, not sure the official report was complete. Here is what we know. 3 experienced lighthouse keepers disappeared from a remote Scottish island in December 1900. The last evidence of their activity was a set of morning readings made at 9 a.m. on December 15th. A canary found alive suggests at least one man may have been present on the island much later than the official timeline indicates. 2 men wore their oilskins. 1 did not. The West Landing showed significant storm damage, but the conditions on December 15th may not have been severe enough to cause it. The official explanation, a rogue wave, is plausible but not confirmed. The captain who wrote the official report privately questioned whether the damage at the West Landing had been caused by something other than weather. No bodies were ever recovered. No definitive cause of death was ever established. Here is what we don't know: what happened between 9 a.m. and nightfall on December 15th. Why all 3 men left the lighthouse simultaneously against protocol. How a canary survived long enough to be found alive if the men disappeared 11 days before Mòr's arrival. What Harvey saw or heard that prompted his private question, and whether the answer to any of these questions is the same answer, or several different ones. The Flannan Isles are still there. The lighthouse is still there, automated since 1971, no longer requiring keepers. Eilean Mòr is still remote, still difficult to reach, still battered by the North Atlantic. James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald McArthur have no graves. Their families never knew what happened to them. The official record says probably drowning. The Lighthouse Board paid their wages to the date of their disappearance, noted their cause of death in a register, and moved on. 125 years later, the question of what happened between 9 a.m. and nightfall on December 15, 1900, has not been answered. We're laying out what we found. You decide what it means. If you know something we don't, you know where to find us. Subscribe, share this, and leave a comment. Because 3 men did their work that morning, and by evening they were gone. And somewhere in the North Atlantic, the sea is still keeping whatever it knows.